Now, Andrew, that was a pretty impressive riff. You got to admit, are you ready to switch and go over to?
I am. Senator McCain wrote an article for Foreign Affairs a couple of years ago, and it has actually a broad vision of where he thinks American foreign policy should go. He, in that article, made a commitment that the United States should deal with the most serious disease in Africa. HIV/AIDS is not the most serious disease. Malaria is. Far more people are infected by malaria, but because people in the United States don't get it, some people don't even know what malaria is. And
some people in the United States get it.
No, I know, you get it, Gail, because you may have had it before, as AID officers have had it. And I used to take my malaria pills whenever I would go to avoid it. But the problem is a large number of children, 1 million children die every year under 5 because of malaria. And it's not focused on, it's a chronic disease, been around a long time. We have prophylactics that can prevent it, and there's 2 or 3 other interventions. John has made a commitment. The United States will make it its priority to eradicate malaria in Africa. And he said it in the article, and we will appropriate the money to do it. The president has already ratcheted up aid from a couple $1 million to $1 billion a year. That's what is a malaria initiative. He said that is not enough, John McCain has said. We need a much larger program. He's a strong supporter of the PEPFAR initiative, and he has said something which, this is a disagreement. I think it's a disagreement. Maybe, actually I shouldn't say that because you said that Barack Obama supports the MCC. The effect of the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the Millennium Challenge account, on even countries that don't get the money is very powerful. I used to have prime ministers come in to see me say, so how is it we qualify for this? I said, we're not interested in you don't have to make any commitments in the future, but if you don't do well in these indicators, you're not going to get the money. It's a performance-based system. So Senator McCain makes a distinction between humanitarian programs and health programs that should be need-based and other forms of assistance. And it's interesting, the great bulk of the money for the MCC is being used for rural infrastructure, for road systems, because there's no money in the aid budget for roads, because there's no constituency domestically. People run around lobbying for roads in rural Africa, except the Africans. If you ask them their first priority, you can't do the rest of this stuff without a road system in the rural areas. People are isolated in the rural areas. There's no way to get to them. How do you run an HIV/AIDS program when you can't get to the villages where people are infected?
Let me ask you a foreign aid question.
So let me just finish with what we want to do. We want to make part of the program performance-based, because unless countries reform themselves internally, and unless we support the reformers in those countries, countries aren't going to change. You can't impose reform from the outside. And we're not, the big thing with the MCC is we're not doing that. And the MCC is not conditionality. Conditionality means if you promise to do these things in the future, you get the money. That's not what it is. It says, here are 16 indicators of what you've already done. And if you've done it, we're going to reward you in the following way, with very large amounts of money, and you decide the sectors it's spent in, and you spend the money through your systems, and we'll help you do that. So Senator McCain has argued in a number of interviews that we need to focus more on this aspect of development in performance-based programming, because it is changing the nature. Many reformers in Africa have told me, not just Africa, all over the world, the best thing you guys ever did was this, because when I go in to see the prime minister who does not want to make these reforms, they said, fine, we won't get the money. I try to convince you to upset interest groups with these reforms. You won't do it. We're not going to get the money, and our neighbors are getting the money instead of us. It is creating competitive pressure for reform internally in countries. And Senator McCain supports that and wants to continue that as a critical element of our aid programming. I strongly support that. He strongly supports it. I could go through a list. The other aspect of this is very important. What Paul Collier says in the bottom billion is that it is insufficient to have foreign aid to save fragile states. He's one of the, he's an economist at the World Bank for 20 years. And a fine scholar. He said, you must have economic growth. And the economic growth can be tied to foreign aid. It's not aid or trade. It's aid and trade. And this is not a debatable, because the Clinton administration did some very good work in encouraging trade with Africa. We expanded that.
But I'm not here as the Clinton.
No, I know that, but the Democratic Party did. So this is not a partisan issue. Both parties supported those initiatives in the Congress.
Right.
But John McCain wants to put a heavy focus on free trade. There have been comments made by Senator Obama, which were very disturbing. In Latin America, people are very upset about it, and in Africa, about protectionism. creeping back into the agenda. If we do foreign aid and then we start protecting our markets, it's a disaster. Senator McCain wants to shut down all agricultural subsidies. You know what the damage that these agricultural subsidies do in the United States to African agriculture and Latin America? It's terrible. So if you do foreign aid, $50 billion, and then I was going to use crude language, you screw the farmers in the third world, what use is the foreign aid? We need an integrated strategy of trade liberalization for third world countries, the elimination of agricultural subsidies, and increased aid. And I might add something that's also very important in terms of this overall sort of approach to this. If we simply do social services and don't do the growth stuff, people will be well educated, they'll be healthy, and they'll be poor.